Welcome to a special 8th birthday episode of the Learning Leader Show presented by Insight Global. I am your host, Ryan Hawk. Thank you so much for being here. Text HAWK to 66866 to become part of Mindful Monday. You, along with tens of thousands of other learning leaders from all over the world, will receive a carefully curated email from me each Monday morning to help you start your week off right. You'll also receive details about how my book, The Pursuit of Excellence, will help you become a more effective leader. Text HAWK to 66866. Now, instead of having a featured leader tonight to celebrate the 8th birthday of this podcast, I am going to answer your questions. I sent out a note to Mindful Monday email readers as well as on social and said I would love to do an AMA and ask me anything as a way to celebrate the 8 years that this podcast has been in existence. And it's an amazingly long time, over 500 episodes, millions upon millions of listeners. And I'm just so grateful, first and foremost, that I get a chance to do this each and every day. And that's because of you listening and sharing and going to ryanhawk.net, which launches you into Apple Podcasts and writing reviews and rating the show. I'm super grateful for that, and we will get to your questions shortly. Before that, I thought this would be a good moment on the 8th birthday of the show to just give a few thoughts on some things I've picked up. Not an extensive book or a post even, but just a few notes that I've taken that I thought would be useful to share before we get to your questions. So here we go. First key learning: consistency beats intensity. Showing up to do all of the necessary work to make something that's useful for others day after day after day, consistently showing up, I believe is more important and more useful than being intense every once in a while or than doing hard work every once in a while. But consistently plodding along day after day seems to have helped. And the reason I say this is because this podcast, The Learning Leader Show, has become a part of so many people's routines. It probably is yours if you're listening right now. Whether it's when you're washing the dishes on Sunday night after family dinner, you're going for your early morning walk on Monday morning, you're commuting to work, you're riding the train, you're working out in the gym, whatever it is, this show has become part of your routine. And when you are consistently shipping great work every Sunday, 7 o'clock Eastern, no matter what, that creates trust. It makes you reliable. People can depend on you. Hey, this is what I like to do. I like to start my week listening to the show. And I think the only way that happens is if both the quality is high and continually gets higher and it's consistently shipped. So to me, consistency is more important than intensity. 2, following your genuine curiosity seems to be attractive to people. There's a parasocial relationship built. As a listener, you get the sense that you are truly understanding me and getting to know me. And that is a fact. You actually are. You can't fake this over 8 years and 500 plus conversations. And really what it's all about is me following my genuine curiosity. I would say I judge episodes based upon emails I receive and comments. And I get the most comments and the most emails when you realize I'm genuinely curious about that topic or that person or a specific element within their story. And so I've found that following your genuine curiosity is quite attractive. And I'm attracted to others who are doing the same. A subset of that is I've learned that there is this spectrum. On one side, it's being deeply curious. On the other side, it's being judgmental of others, judgmental of ideas. And through the course of having so many conversations and meeting people with a wide range of experiences, I think I've moved further along towards the curiosity end of the spectrum and tried to become less judgmental. And this started really early on this podcast, episode 3 with Maurice Claret, when I learned just how different our upbringings were. And instead of judging him for making some poor choices that harmed his career and harmed others, which is still wrong, and he admits that on the episode, but I become more curious about his set of life experiences and less judgmental, which I was prior to that. And I think over time, over these 8 years, I've tried to do that. And that's something I share with other leaders is instead of judging people immediately, why not ask questions? Why not wonder why? Why not approach them with curiosity instead of being judgmental? 3, the prep works as a forcing function to learn. Whether I'm preparing for a podcast conversation or I'm writing my Mindful Monday email that I send every week, the systems that I have in place ensure that I'm getting a little bit wiser each day. I have to, because I'm always deep in the books and the TED Talks and the podcast and whatever my guest has put out into the world. I'm deep into that research process. And through the course of that, I'm learning so much. It's a never-ending process. And when I'm writing my Mindful Monday emails, I usually share about 5 links. I curate those links that I think are most useful for you to read. I'm trying to add value to your life. And in order to get 5 awesome links that are great stories that I think are useful, I probably need to read between 30 and 50 articles to come up with the 5 best. So think about doing that every week. It's a forcing function to learn. And so that's something I've learned is if you're trying to go to bed a little bit wiser each night than when you woke up, which is the famous Charlie Munger quote, what forcing functions are you putting in your life to ensure that happens? My podcast, my email, even if they fail, I still win because I'm learning so much each week. Even if it was a bad week or it didn't go as well as I'd hoped, I'm still winning because of how much I'm learning. So I'd ask you, what forcing functions are you putting into your life? All right, next, just the relationships. Okay, first and foremost, the relationships with my heroes. I think of General Stanley McChrystal and Pat Lencioni and so many, Cat Cole, so many others that by showing up, being overly prepared, treating them with respect, being deeply curious about them and their stories, and then following up afterwards, I get to develop and build real, genuine relationships with people I deeply admire, that I really look up to. And one of the stories off of that is General McChrystal's time on the podcast. We hit it off. It went really well. We kept talking afterwards. He invited me to go to Gettysburg with the class that he teaches at Yale. I was one of his guests along with the class. And here I find myself at Gettysburg, going to each of the sites of battles. And the teacher, the person sharing the historic knowledge of that specific battle, is General Stanley McChrystal. Think about that. He himself is right there. But he's so kind, so curious, so humble, an amazing teacher and leader, and has become an actual friend. So much so that after that trip to Gettysburg, I asked him to write the foreword to my first book, Welcome to Management, and he said yes, and he did it. I mean, that blows my mind. And Pat Lencioni did the same thing for my second book, The Pursuit of Excellence. So I am so grateful that I get to build genuine relationships with people who are heroes of mine, and the podcast has provided that. So I share that as a learning that if you choose to publish work and share it publicly, you never know. You never know the serendipity vehicle you could be creating for yourself, the people that you could attract to you that could become part of your peer group, which is amazing. And then the second part of the relationships is with you, with each and every listener that chooses to invest their most valuable resource, your time, to listen to this, and then follow up and send me a note, Ryan at learningleader.com, right? You send me an email. And I've learned that the people who choose to listen to the show, they fascinate me. It's some of the most impressive leaders out in the world, leading big companies, leading sports teams, running organizations. It blows my mind. And so to build real relationships, even more specific, members of my learning leader circles, blow me away. I mean, I'm getting ready for one of those meetings today, and I'm so juiced up because I learned so much. Now, technically, they are clients of mine. They pay me money. Yet what happens is I learn a ton from them, and we become genuine friends. That just seems to happen over time. It blows my mind. So the relationships element, God, I never thought of that at the beginning of this, but it's just been amazing. And I just say one more key learning, communication. when you talk on a microphone and you're going to listen to yourself every week, it's hard, especially at the beginning, because you cringe so much at the things that you say that in a way it forces you to get better, and you get so many repetitions at it. And the fact that mine are deep, long-form, one-on-one conversations, I think it's made me a better listener. I think it's made me a better speaker. It's made me better when I'm on stage. It's made me better when I work one-on-one with clients. It's made me better in pretty much all facets of my life. Personally, it's made me, I think, a better husband, I hope, a better dad, a better friend. Because if I approach people with curiosity, which is what I try to do on the podcast, and that then carries over into all other elements of my life, then usually that helps me build deeper, more meaningful relationships. So I think I've become a better listener, someone who asks hopefully better follow-up questions than initial ones. And by doing that, I'm deepening relationships with people that I really care about. Okay, those are a few things I've learned that I wanted to share off the top. Now, we're going to get to your questions. A listener, AMA, Ask Me Anything, to celebrate the 8th birthday of the Learning Leader Show. Here we go. All right, first question comes from Learn to Cope on Instagram. That's a screen name. Question: what was the biggest struggle you had transitioning to life after sports? This was really hard for me, and I think that's quite common for a person who has done something for basically their entire life to have that abruptly end. So I started playing all sports in kindergarten. I started playing organized sports very shortly after that. Played football, baseball, basketball in high school. I earned a college scholarship to play football as a quarterback. So not only did I play, I think, a very demanding sport, but had a prominent role on my team as a quarterback who's notoriously known as the leader of the team. So I would say my identity was fully and wholly tied up in being not only a football player, but being a quarterback. And I vividly remember my senior year. I went to college for 5 years because I originally went to Miami University out of Centerville High School. I battled it out with Ben Roethlisberger for 2 years at Miami. After he soundly beat me out for that job, I transferred to Ohio University, where then you have to sit out for a year, where you only get to practice and work out but not play in the games. And then I had 2 seasons to play, and I was my 5th year in college. I was a senior quarterback of the team. I was voted captain by my teammates. It was an up and down year. We had some highs, we had some lows. But that last game, we're playing University of Akron. We're at home. Both of my parents were at the game, which was rare because my younger brother AJ and I were both playing college football at the time. So normally my parents would split up. One would go to his game and one would come to mine. But in that case, they skipped his game and both were at mine because it was my last one. I was bawling in the locker room during warm-ups, and I remember when I walked out with my parents for senior day, I was crying uncontrollably. It was actually really embarrassing. Even as the game was starting and I'm running out for the first series, I was crying. I remember I completed the first few passes, and my teammates looked at me like, "What is going on with you?" I mean, you could see tears in my eyes as I was playing the game. And I finished the game and more tears, and it was awful. My additional family members were there beyond just my parents, and I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to talk to him because I felt like a big part of me was like dead, was dying. That's literally how it felt. And I didn't know how to respond. I was too immature. I meet some people who are seniors in college now, and they're just way ahead of where I was at that age. And so it was just really tough. And I think, as with most things in life that you learn later, it gets better with time. I needed time. I needed to understand that that was a chapter, a very long chapter, a very awesome chapter, one that I still think fondly of, but I just needed time. And you need to find the next thing or things to be passionate about. And I got very lucky. I did end up playing more in the Arena Football League, but in addition to that, I got lucky to have a family friend, a mentor of mine named Rex Caswell. I just had dinner with Rex, in fact, a couple weeks ago. We talked about this, and he gave me a job at LexisNexis working in sales. I'd never sold a thing in my life. I didn't know anything about selling, and if you listen to this show, you know now I am very passionate about the profession of sales. But anyway, Rex gave me that job, and it gave me something to, I think, commit to attack, to really get after it. And it was a very competitive environment. There were a lot of people who I think I got along with, I became friends with. I met other mentors who really helped me get good at the profession of selling, and I did pretty well. It afforded me landing at the top of the stack rankings and winning Circle of Excellence awards, and that felt really good. And so I got pretty passionate about that. And so that helps. So I kind of use some of the passion that was gone from sports into my work in the profession of selling at Lexus. I was able to get promoted, and eventually that passion shifted to becoming a husband, and then becoming a dad, and then eventually to this podcast itself, which is a thing outside of my family that I'm most passionate about. So I think it's really about knowing that time will heal and will help. It's hard to feel that in the moment, but that's certainly, looking back and reflecting, that is the case. But then also figuring out what could be the next thing to push my passion towards. Knowing and understanding and realizing it's okay that I will never run out of the tunnel at the University of Michigan Stadium, the big house, in front of 110,000 people anymore. And nothing I do will ever feel like that, and that's okay. Now, it takes time to realize and understand that and kind of grasp it, but that's just the way it is. Now, when I go out on stage in front of 1,000 people, do I feel some of those same feelings as when I ran out? Kind of, at times. I get some of those nervous, anticipatory feelings before I go on stage in front of a lot of people. Some of it's similar, but not quite. So I just have to, I think, come to the realization, or had to come to the realization, that those days were over, and let's celebrate those days. Let's think about them fondly. But now, where can I push my passion? And so I think it takes time, it takes reflection, and it takes finding the next thing to be passionate about. But good question. Thank you for that. Next one, Kevin Janiak, Janiec, from Instagram. How do you and Miranda balance and align your competing priorities? So Miranda and I both work full time. So I met her at LexisNexis. She was one of the top performing sales professionals there, certainly far better at that job than I was, and still way more talent. I don't say this is like fake humility. It's like legit, far more talented than me as a seller. And as funny as this may sound, but I truly believe this, as a leader. She works in her home office, and I hear her calls with her team. She's leading leaders at a fantastic company right now. And so I actually get to hear her in action. How do we, though, balance and align our competing priorities? I would not use the word competing in that. I think we talk a lot about what we're doing each day. Obviously, there's an element when you're a parent, when you're parents, that there's a logistical part when you have kids of where they need to be and who's going and who's taking them and who's picking up. All of that stuff we do, I think, communicate well. We have calendars to make sure we're in sync and knowing what's going on. But really, it's just about, I think, open lines of communication, going on lots and lots of walks together where it's just us and our dog. So it's just free-flowing conversation to understand, okay, what are you dealing with that's hard? What are you celebrating that's fun? What are you excited about coming up? What's a promotion? She got promoted recently. We talked about the process of her earning that promotion. We talk about the things that I've got going on, whether it's writing books or recording podcasts or who I'm preparing for or what's a strategy I should implement. I think it helps when your partner is somebody that, obviously, there's implicit trust, without a doubt, but also someone who you truly value the way they view the world, their curiosity, their willingness to push at times, but also to just hug you and love you. I think that level of emotional intelligence that she has is very high, and I try to do the same for her, but it's really about being present, showing up, being genuinely curious about the other person, sometimes knowing when to push as well as then when to support and hug and love. Like, all those things happen over time, but I would not say that our priorities compete. I think we try our best to align our priorities, to be there for one another, to know when maybe one of us has a lot more going on than the other one, and we try to play a more supportive role, but that kind of oscillates back and forth because I love that she loves leading people and having a job and being the model for our daughters to say, it's cool to want to be independent and to want to lead and to want to build a career. I think it's awesome too for those moms or dads who choose to stay home and not actually go out into the professional world and work. I think that job is far harder. I shouldn't say I could never do it, but I think I would struggle mightily at doing that. So for the ones who do that and do it well, I mean, my mom did that for many years. It's amazing. But I also love the fact that when we got married, Miranda had said to me and was very overt, I love working. I love building a career. I love the example it sets, and that's what I want to do. And so I fully support that and try my best to be supportive, and she certainly does the same for me because I have a wild schedule where I travel all over the place to speak, and without her support, this certainly wouldn't work. All right, Samantha Phillips on LinkedIn. She's a sales manager at Insight Global. What is one of your champagne toasts, and who is one person you have not yet had on your show you'd like to? Champagne toast. So listen to any of the episodes that my dad has been on, 300, 400, 500. We talk about the victory shot toast. This started we started doing it before football games when either I was playing or my brother AJ was playing. So the person playing obviously wouldn't do it, but everybody else would. And the victory shot simply is you get whatever your choice of drink is. And in this case, it typically was a Washington apple. I don't know how that got started, but years ago, my dad introduced that to us. And it was really like we listed our priorities for the game, and that was to stay healthy, to play great, and to win the game. So the thing I cared about most when I was watching my brother play was that, number one, he stayed healthy. Number two was that he played great. I cared about those two things more than the third. And the third was that I hoped they actually won the game. But it was in order specifically. I wanted his health. I wanted him to play great. And then I hoped their team win. We started then taking that toast and doing it before other big moments like our wedding or any big day, my brother getting inducted into the Ohio State Hall of Fame, or any of these types of big moments in our lives. We'll do the victory shot champagne toast. So it's really just stay healthy, play great, and win the game. That's a sports-oriented one, but it's something that we talk about still. Who's one person you have not yet had on your show that you'd like to? I mean, there's hundreds. The Rock, Taylor Swift, Dave Matthews. Usually, I'm like deeply curious about the creative process, and I could sit there and watch somebody try to create music all day. I mean, I go down YouTube rabbit holes all the time of watching how music starts from nothing. I think of the Paul McCartney video that came out on Disney Plus of him creating the song Get Back, or watching Taylor Swift in the studio create new songs. I love music. I love the creative process. I am absolutely blown away by people who can create from nothing. And that creation is this beautiful art that we all get the benefit from forever. So it would be somebody probably in that creative space who makes something from nothing. All right. Aaron Arnston from LinkedIn. Congratulations, Ryan. Truly blazing a trail. Well done. You have interviewed hundreds of guests, and I have liked every show. Can't recall not one show I didn't like. Have you ever interviewed guests that didn't make the cut, or do you have a filtering process prior to the show that helps with this? So yes, I do have the filtering process is certainly in place. It starts with my own curiosity, knowing that I'm going to do 8 to 10 hours of research leading up to every single interview I do. I have to genuinely be deeply curious about that person. So I've developed relationships with a number of PR people who work with thought leaders, authors, those in that space. And typically how it works now, after I've been doing this for 8 years and it's got built up and there's a lot of trust, they know I'm going to serve their clients well, is they'll send me a list of all of their clients for the upcoming year, and then I will just select from that list of who I'm most curious about. And they'll usually have like a book coming out or something like that. But I don't always want people who are just have a new book. I look for people too who I'm interested in. So that's one part of guest selection is the relationships I built with many PR people, and then I just choose from a list of their clients. Secondly, I'm also still always writing cold emails, and those cold emails are being written based upon people that I see out into the world that look really interesting. Maybe they write great threads on Twitter. I'm like, I got to talk to her. I got to talk to him. Or maybe they've published a book that I've just loved and I want to read. Or maybe I saw them in a documentary or a movie, or I went down one of those YouTube rabbit holes and this person popped up. And so whenever I see anybody in the world, anybody that I'm curious about, I will try very hard to find their email address and send them an impactful cold email. And I've written about what those cold emails, what I say and how I do it to try to get them. But so the cold emailing is a big part of it. Relationships with PR people is a big part of it. I think bringing those together is how I'm able to select guests. The other part of your question was, do I ever essentially shelve an interview that I've done or just not release them? And this is the worst part about having a podcast for me. So first and foremost, I feel that we have continually, I say we because I talk with Eli Liker about this, who edits and produces all these podcasts that I do. I just record them. He does then all of the work afterwards to make them sound good. But I'll ask him regularly, does this one meet our standard? Does this meet our standard? And more over the years, the answer is no. And it sucks, and I hate it when it happens, because if it's a no, then it's gone. We don't release it. And a number of bad things happen then. One, it usually harms the relationship with that person who I recorded with. When I tell them it's not coming out or we're not going to release it, they're usually mad. Now, sometimes I will re-record. It doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes I will. Maybe somebody, I know they've got greatness in them, but for whatever reason, it was an off day and I wasn't prepared. Whenever I do that, I do try to take the brunt of the blame, because as the host of the show, I think it's usually my fault if the recording just doesn't work out. But I feel a certain level of responsibility that our standards always need to be raising. They always need to be going up. And so that means the bar for what does this meet our standard is always going up. And if we don't meet it, then we just throw it away. And that was 8 to 10 hours of prep usually, and that was a full conversation that guest invested, but we don't release it. So if it does get released on the main podcast, on this feed that you're listening to, if it gets released, that means we believe it has met that standard. Now, you may disagree, and certainly that happens sometimes. We believe that it meets that standard. And we have started actually editing a little bit more. If maybe somebody's a bit too long-winded or my questions become long-winded, then we'll edit that down. So we are doing that a little bit more because I am thinking about the vibe. I'm thinking about the experience that it's creating for you as you're listening during your workout or washing dishes or going on your walk. I actually picture you doing that. And if it gets too stagnant or it's not value add enough, I guess is how I'd put it, then we'll either shelve the whole thing or we'll edit it down so that we try to make it better. So the primary thing I'm thinking about is always trying to raise the standard. All right. Next question comes from Noah Vasil. He's a Mindful Monday email response. He says, my question is a 3-parter. What is your favorite part of the job? Do you generally love what you do? And 3, what keeps you interested in going on the days when you're not 100%? What's your favorite part of the job? Having a deep, long-form conversation with a thoughtful, engaging person. It's my favorite thing to do. Most of those are recorded, but not all of them. But my favorite thing about what I get to do is I am constantly in a state of getting to talk to people and ask them whatever is on my mind. And I think that is an amazingly cool job, that I get to talk to fascinating people and ask them questions and try to learn from them. Do you generally love what you do? I do. And I don't take that for granted. I feel very grateful that the bulk of the time, every day, I am doing what I want to do. Now, there is no job in existence where there aren't times when you do stuff that you just have to do as part of the job. The cool thing about what I do is that I think that's limited. I think that's in the large minority of how I spend my days. For the most part, I'm doing what I want most of the time. And usually that is around either preparing for a conversation with somebody I'm deeply curious about, preparing to go up on a stage in front of a lot of people and share what I've learned, or working within my leadership circles, which is a kind of a combination of sharing what I've learned as well as being an interviewer and a facilitator and a curriculum builder. And I do have one-on-one clients I work with, and those conversations, the tough thing about the one-on-one work for me is that I get very invested. I mean, this sounds stupid. This sounds like I'm full of myself, but I get very invested in those few people, and they always evolve into friendships. And so I'm not good at like the professional only relationships. They just evolve into friendships. And as I'm saying that, I realize how that sounds like I'm maybe patting myself on the back, but that just happens. That's the way it goes. People who I work with right now listening to this are smiling and nodding, saying, yeah, that's how it goes, especially over time. So that's the part that I truly love, is that I'm really building relationships with just high caliber, high quality people. What keeps you interested in going on the days when you're not 100%? I mean, the answer to the first two parts is what keeps me going. The fact that I'm spending the bulk of my time doing what I want to do. Is it hard? Of course it's hard. It's really hard. Like, the preparation part are the parts that nobody ever sees. The reading the books till the very end, so you can have Ed Milet looking and say, dude, brother, nobody's ever asked me that before, because that part was at the end of the book, because it's easier to skim the front of the book but not towards the middle and the back, right? So like that part of it, like those moments in a way kind of keep me going and keep me juiced up when I'm not 100%, is because I realize the connection that's being built because of all the work being done when nobody's watching. All right, Brian Causer from Twitter. Congrats, love the show. One of my top podcasts. I listen weekly, maybe. I have two questions. How do you choose your guests? Referrals follow your curiosity. Also, what is one question you wish somebody would ask you that nobody has asked you before? So I already covered the first part of how I choose my guests on an earlier question. So I'll go to the second part. What is one question you wish somebody would ask you about that nobody has asked you before? I don't know if there's a specific question, but I mean, I think I have a pretty broad range of interest. So I could have a podcast where I only talked about sports. I could have a podcast where I honestly only talk about pop culture, and that may be surprising, but ask my wife, she'll tell you. Whether it's the things I'm curious about, documentaries, TV shows, books, like pop culture. And I definitely could have one where I talk about music. I love live music. I love the creative process. I love somebody having the guts to get on stage and play a guitar and sing a song that they created. Like, how awesome is that? How cool is that? So I could go deep on the love of music, especially live music and performing. I mean, I'm getting ready to take one of my daughters to a Taylor Swift concert coming up, and I'm already seeing clips as she just her first shows are coming out, some of the clips, and I am so juiced to go to that show. It's going to be just an amazing father-daughter experience, but also just to see a world-class performer perform her art. I just can't get enough. So I would say it would be about music. Would any questions about that? I'd love to go deep on that. All right, the Greek in the Kitchen from Instagram. Who is the guest you think about most, or has had the most influence on you? So many, but recently, and I'll share one that's more practical because I've taken action. I think all of us should try to take action based on what we're learning, hopefully from this podcast. But I talked to Buzz Williams, and Buzz has a lot of things when it comes to being a leader overall. But the thing that I implemented immediately after the conversation was Buzz, with Buzz, and we talked after the podcast more about this too, was Buzz writes his kids letters regularly. And he was actually reading me some of those letters and talking about how he writes them and what he thinks about. And so I started immediately writing my children letters. I write them every Friday now, and I also include my wife on those. So I sit down and write 6 letters every Friday. And to me, it's been transformational because on a number of levels. One, they seem to enjoy it, which makes me feel very good as the dad that they seem to enjoy it. But also it works as, in a way, like as a forcing function to be on the lookout for what's going on in their lives. And if you, in a way, knowing I'm going to write those letters on Friday makes me think about like, what does each of them individually have going on in their lives? Because I don't want those letters to be about me. I don't want them to be preachy. I want them to be about them and how I am seeing them. I understand what they're going through, that they know I'm paying attention and that I care and that I love them. So they're all about being proud of them, of loving them unconditionally, and then talking about what's going on in their life, not what's going on in my life. I understand from their perspective, they obviously care about me, but they're living their lives. And at that age, you're more focused on kind of like what you have going on. And so I'm trying to meet them where they are. And I don't know if I would have started this letter writing if I hadn't talked to Buzz. And so that's one of the coolest things about doing a show like this is that seems like a basic thing to do. Oh, you write your kids letters every week. But I wasn't, and it wasn't a basic thing for me because I wasn't doing it, but he was, and he told me, and he was like getting emotional when we talked on the phone about this afterwards, about like how impactful, because he's been doing it for a while now. And so just things like that, like what guests do I think about most? Because I write those letters every week, I actually think about Buzz, and because he's the one who gave me the idea. And now the cool thing that's happened is I've gotten a number of emails from people to say, hey, because of your podcast with Buzz, I've started writing my kids letters. So to see that kind of butterfly, that ripple effect, that this one conversation and even like one part of a conversation has started to have with not only me, but others is so cool. So I would say a guest I think about most or has had the most influence on me recently is Buzz Williams. Okay, Denise Colias on LinkedIn. Hi, congratulations. I've been listening to your podcast since 2017. It's been a godsend. It's taught me so much. I appreciate all your hard work. You continually bring insightful conversations on leadership. My question is, what episodes were your favorite to record, or the top 5 that you recommend with the greatest impact to help people grow or push through? This is one I should have done a little more pre-work. Okay, top 5. Kat Cole. I say this every time, but she's been on twice. So search Ryan Hawk and Kat Cole in Google, and you'll see those pop up. I would say that is big time. I hold our military in the highest regard. I live in the United States. I'm very grateful for people that have put their life on the line. That's something I haven't done to these people to serve and support our country. So General Stanley McChrystal, I've had him on a few times. Admiral William McRaven. Those two guys I think about a lot. General McChrystal wrote the foreword to my first book, Welcome to Management. So I think McChrystal, McRaven, Kat Cole. Jim Collins has been on a few times. Jim was my first kind of leadership management hero because I read Good to Great. I was not a book reader growing up. I wasn't a book reader in college. I wasn't even a book reader shortly after college. I had to mature and grow up a little bit before I understood the value of books. And Good to Great's one of the first books I ever read. And so Jim Collins is a big one. So that's big. And then I'd say, to add one more, I think Sherry Cole is amazing. She's become a friend. We're going to hang out at my event I have coming up that I'm so excited to have her there, and she's going to share some of her wisdom with everybody. Her book, Rooted to Rise, is cover to cover, just killed me because it's so good. I kept texting her saying, how do you write this well? How are you this talented? You've built your skills this high, however you'd put it, to put out what you have. Her stuff's so good, and she's an even better person off air than she was on, and she was just fantastic when Sherry Cole. So those are the first ones that come to mind. So thank you for that question, Denise. Okay, JP Botera on Instagram. After 8 years experience, what would you recommend to the Ryan thinking of creating the Learning Leader Show? In a way, I'm actually glad that I was so naive at the beginning. I'm glad that I didn't know how hard it would be. I'm glad that I didn't think long term. I'm glad that I didn't have goals. The only thing I thought about at the beginning was I wanted to meet fascinating people and ask them questions that stemmed from my genuine curiosity. And I didn't analyze it. I didn't even think about it that much. I did study a little bit about like how you launch a podcast and like how the algorithm in iTunes worked at the beginning. It used to be called iTunes, it's called Apple Podcasts now. I studied that, but that wasn't a big part of my prep. So in a way, like, I don't know if I would recommend anything, because I was so naive that I think that helped me, as weird as that sounds, because it was just about the conversations. It was just about following my curiosity. It was just about the prep. I had no intention to leave my full-time job, because I started this on the side when I had a full-time job. I never considered that. That never was the goal. It was always just about me being able to follow my genuine curiosity with great rigor, as Brian Koppelman told me. And that's like that alone, because now I'm asked a lot about, okay, I want to start a podcast, or I want to create something that is like marketing for my business. And I know I'm just like one example, but my thing is, I think it's too hard if you're doing it as like a marketing tool. To me, whatever the thing that you want to do is, I think there's got to be a love of the work, a love of the process, a love of actually doing the thing. The reward is that you get to keep doing it. That is truly what it is for me. Like, I think part of the reason that the primary reason that I do create services and offerings for people, and I go speak on stages, is because that part earns me the money so that I get to keep making art. And so at times you have to sell your art so that you get to keep making it. But the reward is not the money. The reward is that I get to keep doing it. But at times you got to have money to support your family, right? So I think that's like what it may, again, sound like pretentious saying this is art, but I do view it that way. And I also identify a lot with artists who just love painting, or they love creating, or they love writing, and they sell it just so they can keep doing it. And that's how I view it, that the reward is not the money you get for it. The reward is that enables me to keep doing it, to keep producing the art. So I'm just super grateful that at the beginning I didn't think that much about it, because the reward was doing it, and that hasn't changed. The reward for me now is that I get to keep doing it, and that's why I do work really hard at it, because I feel so grateful that the work I'm doing is purely a reward each and every day. Okay, Aaron Campbell, one of my good friends and mentors from LexisNexis, sent me this on LinkedIn. After 8 years of exploration along a central theme, how would you finish this sentence? A great leader is ... A great leader is someone who gets people to want to do what must be done. Learned that from Jim Collins, and I love the simplicity. If you deconstruct that sentence, a great leader is someone who gets people, so you're getting people to do something that must be done. So the getting people part is your actions, your character, your behavior as a leader has to be so inspiring and so interesting and curiosity inducing that it gets people to want to take action, right? So that's the gets the people part. And that is, you get them to want to do it, not to comply. You get them to commit to it. There's a big difference. Compliance can be commanded, commitment cannot. I write about that in Welcome to Management, right? The best of the best leaders. I think a lot of people can get compliance based on rank or title or org structure and who you report to, right? You can force people to comply. You have to earn commitment. And someone who gets people to want to do it, they've earned that commitment. And they continually earn it day after day after day by them being an excellent leader, right? Being a person of character and work ethic and attitude and results, all of that gets people to want to do it. Then the what must be done part, that's where the strategic element comes into play. It is, I think, entirely wrong to be climbing a ladder or climbing a mountain, and then you get to the top and you realize it was the wrong mountain, right? And there are leaders out there who do that, who don't have any form of strategy or no strategic thinking or no plan or nothing like they're really like this North Star they're going towards. And I think great leaders, not only do they get people to want to do it, but they also know what must be done. So it sounds like such a simple sentence, but there's so much into it that I think a great leader gets people to want to do what must be done. Thank you, Aaron. Great one. I'll do one more. Gian Lemmy, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Director of Tennis Operations at Liberty University. When did you know you were ready to step away from working for someone else and leaned into your business full time? By the way, when you own your own business, instead of having one boss, you have many. So I don't think of it as working, that I've stepped away working for someone else. Now I just work for a lot more people than I used to because every one of my clients is my boss. That's how I view it. I have to be adding value to my clients. And if I don't, they should fire me immediately. I do no long-term contracts with anybody. Every single client engagement I have is on a month-to-month basis. So the instant I stop adding value, I expect them to fire me. And I view that every time. So to me, I have to earn it every single second that I'm with them. I would never, I shouldn't say never, but I can't imagine the day where I would ever lock somebody into a contract where you have to work with me and pay me for this amount of time. In fact, for a keynote speech, if anyone ever thought I didn't absolutely give everything I had on stage, I would give the money back or I would not accept the money. I don't think you deserve to be paid just because you showed up. I think you do have to show up, but you also have to bring immense value. So I know that wasn't your question, but I don't view this as working for myself. I view this as working for many people because many different people pay me now for the services I provide as someone who tries to share what I've learned. And that's how I view it. I'm just sharing what I've learned with people, whether it's on stage for a keynote speech, whether it's with members of my leadership circles, whether it's one-on-one or with the companies that we work with when we go and do ongoing trainings. If they all know this now, there are no locked-in long-term contracts. Would it benefit me? Would it make it safer for me? Probably, but I honestly just don't feel right by doing this. Every single thing I do is month to month. But when did I know that I could do this, that this could potentially be the thing that supports my family? I left in 2017 to do this full time because the market was telling me over and over and over. What I mean by that is I was shipping work right on my podcast since early 2015. And over time, I would get requests, hey, will you come speak at this event? Will you come speak at our sales kickoff meeting? Will you come speak at this conference? Hey, will you help us develop a leadership development program for all of our leaders? Hey, will you work with me one-on-one, right? Then we started creating courses and we started creating leadership circles. So enough of that had happened where I was literally having to use all of my PTO days, my paid time off. And it was, I think, probably becoming a distraction. Not like the people that worked for me didn't say that, but it had to be on their minds. Where I was then had to make a choice: do I keep doing this on the side, but I would have to scale it down a little bit and have to say no, and then focus more on my full-time job, or do I say I'm gonna double down or triple down on this learning leader work and see what happens, and I'll give everything I've got to it. And if it doesn't work out, then I will go back to getting a job. But if it does, it could be really cool. It could also be, I think, to me, that I was thinking of, it could be inspirational for those in my life, the people that I'm trying to lead, the people I love the most, children, my wife, extended family, to say like, hey, I'm going to go and give this a go. And that was an exciting thought to me. And it wasn't just that it was exciting. It was that the market had told me enough times, hey, if I'm starting to do the math here, while I'm going to take a pay cut, I think I could get back to where I was and beyond if I dedicate 100% of my effort to it every single day. And now here we are, and it's been, 5+ years later, and I'm well ahead of where we were before. But that's not without a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of help from a number of people and a lot of luck. And so I'm grateful for all of that. I'm trying to make the most of that luck. And say thank you to the people who have supported me and continue to support me, which is you who's listening right now. That means the world to me, and I don't take that lightly. I'm super grateful that I get the opportunity to do what I love on a daily basis. And that's why I say that at the end of every podcast, because I truly mean it. Without your support, without your help, without you spreading the word, this ends, because the number one driver for everything I do is this podcast. Now, the books have certainly helped. Books add another line of credibility. So when you publish books, does create kind of another way for people to become aware of you. But for the most part, almost everything I do stems from this show. And that is what is just purely amazing to me, and I'm super grateful. So I will close with that by once again saying thank you. Truly, truly thank you so much for continuing to spread the word, for telling your friends, hey, you should listen to the Learning Leader Show. I think it'll help you be a more effective leader. And because you have done that for years and continue to do that, and then you write all the reviews and send emails to your friends, hey, check this out. That's what gives me the opportunity to keep doing this. And I intend to do it for a very long time. I don't see any reason to stop doing it. So as long as I'm able, that's what I'll keep doing. So again, I'll reiterate, thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Can't wait.